Welcome in, everybody. This is Kyle Hunter. I'm joined by Ron A Sports. We're going to talk about some college football offseason. I know it's late February and most people are not thinking about college football, but there's some pros to thinking about college football right now. We're going to talk about some of those, look at what happened in the past year, talk about some of the offseason. Ron, it's going to be great to talk to you here today. How's everything going for you?
Kyle, it's great. First of all, I hope you're getting some sleep these days with college basketball and the college football. It just seemed like it. The season just keeps going on. I'm used to football ending the end of January, and now we're 2 weeks, 3 weeks into February, and we've had no rest. But thanks for agreeing to do this because I had this kind of vision that with everything going on in college football, it never sleeps either. We've got 31 coaching changes at the head coach level. We've got coordinator changes. We've got so much going on. And to brainstorm this with you, someone who's really knowledgeable about the schemes, about diligent about preparing in advance for college football, I thought this would be kind of a mini on-screen brainstorming session that I hope brings the conversation to others that appreciate this and understand the work that needs to go in and has their own opinions. It may be different than us, which is fantastic, or it may be the same as us. But I just thought this was a good time period to get together and discuss all the stuff that's gone on since college football ended.
Yeah, I agree. I see we're live here. I see quite a few people joining in live, so we appreciate you guys who are joining in. And if anybody does have any questions or anything, feel free to put those in the YouTube chat and we can answer those questions. Otherwise, we'll kind of move through the discussion here and try to help you out with some information and discuss. Hey, Steve, how's it going? Hope everything's going well there. And we'll just discuss through this. I'll start by saying I think that in-depth off-season prep is probably about the most underrated thing to try to have a successful season in college football, especially now. Ron, you know this. This is it's changed a lot. The landscape is completely different than it used to be. You can't just take 5 months off and show up late July and decide let's go ahead and look at a few of these things. So many different things are changing in college football today. What does it mean? I mean, to me, extreme turnover can be pretty tiresome. We'll talk more about turnover and all the changes and stuff, but it is true that some of the turnover, especially from players or coaches moving from one place to another, can be opportunities to bet either season win total, something that Ron and I have done, both of us successfully over the years, futures, or even just betting the beginning of the season. It's hard for the odds makers to keep up with all the changes. We talk about offensive coordinators, different scheme changes, things like that. I think this is a good time to be looking at, those teams that you want to kind of bookmark to come back to, hey, there's a lot of changes here, a lot of new players, new coaches, new scheme. Maybe those are ones that I want to key in on. And those teams that have the same coaches, the Ferentz, the coaches like that have been there for a really long time, they're obviously going to look quite a bit like they have in the past. Now, Iowa, obviously a little bit different on offense, but you get the point. Some of these teams are going to look similar to what they have in the past. I think it's better to look at the teams who have the significant changes across the board.
Yeah. And, there used to be a routine for college football where I could put it aside until July 4th. And then from July 4th to August 15th, it was just nonstop writing and researching and doing everything I need. And that was enough time to preview 130 teams and so on and so forth, especially when you had fewer changes. We had 20 plus coaching changes every year, but we didn't have all the coordinator changes. And now we have 50, 60 quarterbacks that are on completely new teams. We have the one-time transfer rule. We have money grabbing where the group of five, the gap between the group of five and the power 4 or 5 conferences is just widening because every time you get a superstar at the University of Buffalo or at Akron or wherever, they're going to be paid now to go to another program and to have the dream of going to the NFL, even though we know 1% of these college starters are ever going to make it in the NFL. It's a tough sell, but they're dreaming. and they want to do this, and they're transferring and they're going in, and it makes our job harder. And I'm not one for loving all this change where you now have complete roster overhaul. Colorado, 90 different players last year under Deion Sanders. Arizona State, 50 some different transfers. And now every time you have a new coach, you have a 30-day window period where players can transfer. And people are going in, going out, and the better coaches are going to be able to assemble all this and somehow work some magic. And Kyle, what we see in September might be completely different than what we see after they assess their roster in October. So we're not even sure what we're getting from 1 month to the next. And it makes it hard on us, but I guess we're up for the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we have to do at this point. We don't really have a choice. It's changed a lot. And like you said, you almost have to be quicker to adapt or change, even in power ratings, things like that. Because in the past, I was always like, well, I don't want to be one to be quick to make big changes. But now, if you're not quick to make some pretty big changes, it didn't feel like you could be behind. That doesn't necessarily mean from one game you upgrade a team X amount. But in general, if you see a trend, you have to be willing to make those changes quicker than what you did in the past. This is a landscape that really changes really quickly. So, Ron, let's talk a little bit about the past season. Let's go back to last season. We had a good season of college football, some good drama. We had Michigan winning it, which is not, obviously Michigan's not my favorite team, Ron, but a great season by them. I think for me, I'll start by saying Michigan kind of proved that, look at their recruiting classes. It's not that they had bad recruiting classes, but they weren't, top 3 or 4 consistently. Harbaugh's a good coach. Obviously, he's moved on, but Harbaugh's a really good coach, and they were excellent in the trenches. And if you're excellent in the trenches, you can still win games and win championships here, even without the very best skill position players. I think that's kind of a takeaway for me. It's not just Michigan. Some of the other teams in the smaller conferences that were really strong on the line. Ron, you know this, but being good in the trenches is ultra important. If you can't keep your quarterback upright, you're going to have a hard time regardless of their skill position players. And that can be challenging to rate teams based on, they bring in all this skill position talent. I mean, frankly, Colorado's a great example. I mean, you talk about Colorado had some really good skill position players last year, but they couldn't block anybody. They're going to have to get a line. That was not Sanders being poor at quarterback. That was, a terrible offensive line in front of him. And they got to be better at stopping the run too. So I think that is kind of my key takeaway. I'm going to let you give some of your thoughts about the last season, then I'll come back in too.
Yeah, I think your point about the offensive line is tremendously underrated. When you have continuity, when you have all 5 starters returning on the offensive line, it's such a correlation, a positive correlation to season wins. It's amazing. I had never seen this before, but of course now I've had to adjust how I look at starters. If you're bringing in a 3-year starter from a Power 5 school that transfers to you, I think you have to count those starts. The problem is if you're bringing in 3 new offensive line players to a team, continuity is lost a little bit. But if you bring in 1 offensive line starter to an established offensive line, it really matters. Florida State, 209 offensive line returning starts to that unit. I mean, obviously they were going to be better. If you combine all the experience, the people that came in as the super seniors, the seniors that came in extra year of COVID, plus they got a transfer, so it was actually their 5th year in college, experience really mattered. I looked at Missouri, most experience returning according to Phil Steele. Look at their season. I mean, everybody expected them to go to a bowl game. I'm not sure many people expected them to have double-digit wins. Michigan's experience topped the Big Ten. Florida State, we talked about. Oregon and Washington, they were 2nd and 3rd in returning starting talent in the Pac-12. So it really mattered. Was it true in absolutely every case? Not necessarily, but it was probably true in enough that there was a positive correlation. Um, that was the takeaway. Let me give you one other takeaway from me. And unfortunately, it was the bowl games. We're now talking about not Christian McCaffrey and three other people missing a bowl game. We're talking about if you're one of the reasons for the fact that we're going to a 12-team playoff, and we might even go beyond that soon enough, is because they want these college players to play a little bit longer, including in the bowl games. But I can't tell you how many times I had to readjust and dig deeper for college bowl game analysis, trying to write up every game when you weren't sure how many starters were going to play. That was irritating to me. And I found that the games I did the best in, especially with props, were the games where not too many significant players opted out of bowls.
Yeah, I agree. Without getting too negative about this, I'll say that, the bowl game season was always kind of my favorite in sports. You get into the late December, early January period. It was just so much fun as a fan, even. And it's hard now because you get these huge matchups, and then you realize that, three-fourths of the key players are not even going to be there.
Yeah.
So everything that we've just seen, you can look at every stat that you have. It really doesn't matter in that game. So that makes it a really hard handicap. And for me personally, I'm not going to bet as many bowl games as I have in the past. The last couple of years, I bet less of them. Sometimes people are saying, why you used to have, X amount of plays and
Yeah.
you have less. I'm like, there's just too much unknown. The unknown is not a positive for people in this space. When we're trying to handicap games, I don't want a huge amount of unknown. And I agree with you on the props too. I think with props, betting overs is especially tricky in that time, because we also saw some of those key players that would play like one quarter or two quarters or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yes.
And all at once they come back out and they're in sweatpants or something. And it's
Yeah.
hopefully you don't have over, because they're only, a yard and a half short with half the game left. But I mean, that makes it really tricky. And for me, bowl season isn't quite as exciting as it used to be. Obviously, we'll handicap it the same, as much as we have in the past. And in fact, like you said, it'll take more time. But I think it's going to be harder to find plays that I like quite as much in bowl season. I think earlier in the season is going to be better for edges, where everybody's going to be trying to play. They want their spot on the team. They want to prove a point. You would think you'd get max effort from those teams then. The later you get, the more question marks there'll be. Ron, one other thing I wanted to bring up was the clock change from last year.
Oh.
I'm a big totals better. I didn't have as good a year this past year. I'd had two really good seasons in a row. Kind of a down college football season for me this last year. I did really well on the season win totals and futures, but the game-to-game bets were not as good for me this year. I really think that the rule changes on things like that, it happened in college basketball a few years ago when they changed it from 35 seconds to 30 seconds on the shot clock. That was a really poor year for me. And then last year with the rule changes on when the clock would stop and when it wouldn't, definitely affected my totals handicapping. I'm hoping now that we can get some consistency and see, a year's worth of data, that will help. But, if you have something in place that's worked really well, those kind of rule changes aren't terribly helpful.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, since I do not play as many totals as you do, nor do I feel like that's my expertise, how the clock rules would affect the number of underdogs versus favorites, and even some of the betting lines. Would my power ratings be off a little bit because there are fewer plays? So presumably, if you have scores that are 5, 6, 7 points lower, we didn't know at the beginning of the season, how would that affect what I did in terms of adjusting my power ratings? Because I've used the same power rating system for 40 years and I haven't had to change it. And I think because we're in the era where the college football games are trying to emulate the NFL a little bit, and they're trying to go for more spread option, they're trying to prepare more quarterbacks to run more. We see more pass more. We see more pass plays as compared to run plays, except for when you get the lead, you can milk the clock a little bit more with running plays if you have that offensive line, if you have that kind of system. So I'm still sorting through the data. I didn't see a lot of changes in terms of the power ratings. I had a really strong start to the season, but I think it had nothing to do with the clock. It had more to do with preparation and trying to be one step ahead of the coaching changes and stuff like that. And, example being Colorado, the hype at the beginning of the year when they were playing that's really a cushy schedule and nobody knew how to defend them was amazing. I'm not sure if it was you or some others who said they found an under 7 wins during the year and just, went crazy on it. I did find an under 6.5, and I said, yeah, I have to have this. The Pac-12 was so strong, and they hadn't played any of the stronger teams yet. So I was just looking for those adjustments, but I'm still inconclusive on how the clock affected me. And I think I need to look more data and get some more analysis from you and others on the topic.
Yeah, it's just kind of looking at the last year. It was 459 overs, 435 unders. So Ron, remember last year when they were changing the rules and like on your timeline on Twitter or X, there were so many people saying like unders are going to be free. This is going to be so
Yeah.
easy, just bet. If the masses are saying that, it's probably a bad sign. But the marketplace is going to adjust. The odds makers know about these rule changes too, obviously. As far as dogs and favorites, 449 dogs, 439 favorites, very close. So and home and away was pretty split again. Away teams have done better in the past few years, both in college football and the NFL. That's probably a different discussion, but I think home field advantage is probably still a little bit overrated by some people. These teams have gotten more used to playing on the road. It's not quite the same ridiculous travel schedules as there used to be. So I think that will probably continue to be my lean, is that most people might overvalue home field by a little bit still. But in general, I think that was some great thoughts. And Ron, can we talk about a couple coaches that we had pre-opinions on last year? I'm going to let you start here. So from 2023, what coaches did you make stronger opinions on from the start, and did it go right or wrong for you?
I'm going to skip the Arizona State, Colorado discussion because those were easy to me. Arizona State and a loaded Pac-12, new coaching staff, billions of new players. One right and one wrong. Trent Dilfer was the coach that took over at UAB. Now, for those of you who do not follow UAB football, and I'm not faulting anybody for that because they almost lost their program. They did lose their program for a couple of years, but Bill Clark stuck with it. And Bill Clark, until he was forced out of the game, self-forced out of the game because severe back pains, back surgery, and so on, was perhaps one of the 2 or 3 best coaches that you've never heard of in college football. Kind of Bill Snyder-like when he took over the Kansas State program. And so he had to miss the year before Trent Dilfer took over. The program went 6-6, even though they had strong quarterback and running back play. And now Trent Dilfer takes over with virtually no college experience. There were other coaching members that were gone. Their quarterback was gone. They were moving to a new conference. They had 7 returning starters overall. And contrary to how the transfer portal works, it wasn't like they were picking up marquee talent. They were losing talent. And to me, it was a no-brainer to go under 5.5 and then under 5 wins because I didn't see a path to 6-6 at all. Now, it turns out they had some pretty good offense during the year, but they really couldn't stop anybody. But I felt pretty confident about that one. One I got wrong, Kyle, was Northwestern. We all thought, and we still think that Pat Fitzgerald was a tremendous coach, got them to overachieve. They have obviously high academic standards. Looked like they were going to improve off a dismal 2022 with 8 returning starters defensively, and then fired for cause, scrambling. They hired David Braun, a complete unknown. He had been with the program, I believe, 9 months, 8 months maybe, hired in January, and all of a sudden he's taking over. I thought there'd be a mass exodus, or at least a little bit of exodus, where the players would say, "Hey, I'm bolting this program. I'm firmly in charge. I firmly support Fitzgerald. I don't like the way the program is going." We didn't see that mass exodus. we saw some stats that are concerning to me, but they made the most out of whatever the program was. They certainly overachieved to the nth degree. I never saw a bowl game in their horizon, much less threatening to do some really positive things all year long. It's one I got wrong and probably would have got wrong, if I had to do it all over again. I applaud David Braun for a job well done.
Yeah, fantastic. I agree. There's no way you could have expected him to do that well. That looked like a really bad situation last year before the season, and he really made the most out of it. So it'll be interesting to see how they do going forward, because Northwestern has kind of been inconsistent in past years, even with Fitzgerald, who I think was a fantastic coach, against the spread, especially. But it'll be interesting to see how they do going forward. So I'm going to start with the team that I got most right was Cincinnati. Satterfield came into there. It was a terrible spot for him. And I don't know that the fact that they went 3-9 necessarily means that Satterfield is a bad coach. I think anybody who went in there was going to have to work some kind of minor miracle to get to a bowl game. It was always going to be really hard to go into the Big 12, to lose as many players as they did, many key players. And I think Fickle's a good coach. I know he didn't look that great in his first year at Wisconsin, but I'm still very high on Fickle as a coach. And, so many people leave. You had a season win total of 5.5. That was one that I did hit pretty good. I think Cincinnati still, this could probably be an issue for them going forward too. I would tend to think that Cincinnati as a team I'll be lower on than the market, even starting this coming season, because I don't know that I trust them to be able to just turn it around in a conference that's a good conference. I still think that they will be a little bit down compared to what people would think. Now, for me, the one that I was most wrong on, and I did not bet a season win total under here because the number was so low that, I considered it but didn't do it. I'm glad I didn't. USF, Golesh did a great job for USF. At the beginning of last year, when I saw them have a couple good performances, I kind of threw them out as, it's a one-time thing. They probably can't keep that up. The off season, all the talk that he had of, we're going to play ultra fast. And I've said this before, Ron, like there's so many coaches that say we're going to play really fast, as, up tempo. It's like, it's almost the thing that coaches have to say, whether they're going to do it or not. Tempo, let's go. He actually did it, even though most people said, hey, you're at a talent disadvantage. Is this really going to work? And it did. Their offense was good. I know their defense was bad, but you're always going to give up a lot of points if you're playing as fast as what they were there. And then obviously for the season to end in the bowl game the way it did, fantastic performance by them. I know the other team in that game was in kind of a weird spot, but that's one of those where we can talk about afterwards, Ron, and say, this seems like, the one team, did they really even care to be there? The other team clearly did. As you know, motivation is everything in bowl season, especially now. But I think the Golesh did a great job, and overs with that team were really great because the tempo that they played and the kind of amount of plays they'll have. I think it'll be harder to hit overs with USF going forward because the marketplace is going to be setting just ridiculous totals on USF games. But I did not expect them to be so good right away. So can we get into some of the coaching changes that we have for the season ahead now?
Let me make a couple comments.
Yeah.
Just I endorse both of yours, and other than James Madison, when schools go up in class, it's generally harder. I mean, James Madison defied that. Of course, we'll be talking about their former coach coming up. And USF, I mean, they had virtually no offense under, I think it was Jeff Scott. And then all of a sudden they're scoring 40 points a game, it seems. It was just a night and day difference. And, you have to adjust. I tried to stay clear from their games until I got a better picture of what they're all about. And like you, I said, they're not letting up. This is still going on. So even if we're wrong about something early in the season, if we're open-minded and we use the 4-game rule, which I use, where I transfer over and I just use 2023 data in this case after 4 games are played, and I see, hey, wait a second, they're a different team. Forget about what happened the previous year, then I hopefully can make the adjustments and be more spot on.
Yeah, I agree. You got to be careful to do it too quick, but you have to be willing to adjust. And there's that fine line. It's pretty tricky.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of changes, obviously, going into the next season. And as we said, I know the games are 6 months away, but spring games are about to kick off multiple places before too long here, Ron. And the next the off season, even the transfer portal and the recruiting classes are all coming earlier than they used to. Season win totals come out way earlier than they used to, obviously. When they start putting out some of those season win totals, I see them, I'm like, already? Wow, this is crazy. Obviously, the limits can be lower on those, but still, it's crazy to see those come out so early. You have to prep much earlier than you did before. Ron, I saw in our notes here, you said let's start off with the SEC here in this one. I'll let you go ahead and start. Which team do you think we should start out talking about in the SEC?
Well, I guess I went alphabetical order, so you might as well start pretty much at the top where Nick Saban is gone and Kalen DeBoer is in. And it's a fascinating change. We all know it's hard to replace a legend. It's usually the coach after the coach that gets it done. But this is an out of the box hire to me that could work. Although for the first time, we're seeing, instead of, if Saban says, I'm interested in you as a player, would you like to transfer? The player was already on the plane hopping over and getting into the building and saying, Nick Saban wants me. It's really changed around where a lot of people are decommitting from Alabama and they're moving to other places. I like what Alabama and DeBoer is going to bring to the table, but I wonder if it's going to be that culture change. I wonder if we're going to see a slippage, especially defensively. And one other thing I wonder, because people know me, people who follow me, know I have to squeeze in a few special team comments every now and then. I don't see a dedicated special team coordinator right now for Alabama. And at a major university that can print money, I don't understand it. Now, maybe it's early, maybe they'll add one later on or something like that. But that scares me a little bit. The little things that have happened, because I think Alabama's kicker was perfect this past year. The little things that could happen in games has me thinking we're going to see something, close game losses where we didn't see them before. So what are your thoughts on Alabama?
I think that Bama fans will have to be patient with Kalen DeBoer. It's going to be super hard to be as good as they were right away because of what you said. They kind of had this mass exodus of really good players. Like a Downs that was their leading tackler last year. Many of those guys are going to hurt. Now, I think Alabama will pick up some big names later on in the process here before we get to next season, but. It's going to be hard for them to have the same talent level they had before. I think I do want to caution people from being too negative about DeBoer. Some people say like, well, he's not been around there. He's not from there, so he can't. Yeah. DeBoer has won everywhere he's gone. I know some people say, well, it's the NAIA. Who cares what you did at Sioux Falls? If you win as many games as he has, 13-1, 14-0, 14-0, 15-0. You're a really good coach. So he knows football. The question is, what can he do as far as recruiting and the transfer pickups? I know that once those guys get there, he knows how to coach football. The question mark is going to be around what kind of talent they'll have compared to what they had before. I tend to think that it was a pretty good hire given the situation they were in. Saban did this, and I don't think the world didn't know this was coming. And it kind of set off a chain reaction.
Yeah.
And it was, it wasn't just 2 or 3 schools. I mean, there's a lot of schools involved with this, the reaction to this, but I think Alabama did a good job based on what they had. I think that they'll be down initially. Let's revisit this one in, 2 years or something and see what it's looking like, because I do think that DeBoer is a really good coach. So we will see. Mississippi State in the SEC. Lebby comes in there. I'm going to start off here by saying I feel like he's kind of up against it here. I mean, Mississippi State's at a pretty big disadvantage to some other teams that they're playing against. And are we confident that Lebby is going to get? I know he's a good offensive mind? Is he going to be able to get a good enough defense to stop people in the SEC consistently? I tend to think that this was like a kind of a middling hire. Not saying that he's a bad coach or anything. I know he does have some what shall I call it? Maybe baggage from his past, and just in general, I don't want to get in depth on that. But was this a great hire by Mississippi State? Maybe not. Obviously, Mississippi State, you can't hire the same way that you could at Alabama or someplace like that. But this is one where I would tend to be a little bit lower than what some other people would be. So I'm curious, how you would kind of rate this.
Yeah, I wonder if I'm Jeff Levy, why Mississippi State?
Yeah.
It's a tough. I mean, I would rather prep at a school where I know I could win because I have that offensive philosophy, proven offensive philosophy. UCF, Ole Miss, Oklahoma. He's done a lot of good things offensively, and I wonder why he wouldn't take that, make that an advantage. And then I know there's money in the money talks, and Mississippi State could certainly. I'm certain he had a really good contract here, but I would have gone with another job first. That's not to say he's not going to put up points on the board. Mississippi State took a step back without Mike Leach last year. Same quarterback, different system, tried to mix in the run with the pass. It didn't work. And so they went back with an offensive mind. So from Mississippi State's point of view, I think they like this hire, and I think he could do a lot of things. But just like what you said, Kyle, I think defensively we're going to start to see slippage. Mike Leach was a little bit underrated defensively. They slipped a little bit last year, if I recall. They're going to lose Will Rogers, their quarterback. They're going to rely on what I think is going to be a highly touted freshman to take over, which Levy will probably coach up. But I think with some of the player turnover I've seen, there will be a slow start defensively. Maybe we look at some overs early in the year. I'm just putting that out. But I kind of agree with you. A little bit of a sideways hire at first, and maybe he'll find his footing down the road. But the SEC is tough.
Oh, very tough. No doubt about that. It's Texas A&M. This is a team that people have been high on every year. You look at their recruiting classes, they seem to have underachieved consistently. We know they have plenty of money at Texas A&M. They've proven that many times now. I think Elko's fantastic. Great coach. He's proven himself as a great defensive mind. And to me, Colin Klein has done a very good job as an offensive coordinator. So I think that's a really good pickup. Texas A&M, I'm not saying they're going to win immediately right away. I'm not saying they're going to just turn everything around immediately. But this is a good hire, in my opinion. This is a great job. A guy that's going to maximize talent better than Fisher has in the past. I think they'll be better in the trenches. Fisher has had a long-term issue with having good offensive lines. I think that will probably improve going forward. And A&M, in the ever-changing landscape with NIL, I think A&M is going to be a pretty big player. So I like this hire quite a bit.
I think Fisher is getting a bad rep because I think he's a good coach and has been a good coach. Elko might be still a little bit of a step up from that, but we shouldn't dismiss the fact that they had pretty good coaching. They didn't get the job done. They had some injuries. They had erratic quarterback play. You mentioned the offensive line. It's, on the one hand, can I say that he's a pretty good coach, yet they underachieved, especially given the recruiting that they had. I like Elko's entire staff that they brought in. I think Colin Klein is proven in terms of how he runs his system and how he can get them going. Duke, under Elko, not necessarily under Colin Klein, but under Elko, had some pretty good run-pass balance when he was there. Doherty is a defensive coach. Jay Bateman has a ton of experience. I think this is a pretty good staff. A&M has the money to recruit. I don't know that they have top-notch recruiters on the staff, but if they can get enough talent, I think Elko can come in and coach them up. So I think there's going to be a chance that they better their record right away with this hire. And Elko's been there. We know he was defensive coordinator at A&M. So he knows the culture. He knows the challenges. He's not stepping into the fire or something that he's not, that he hasn't been familiar with. And I think that's a plus as well. So you have 3 new coaches overall in the SEC, and you have 2 new teams coming into the SEC. So as we wrap up the SEC, anything that you feel that you're looking forward to in the SEC for the coming year?
I'm going to bring up another team who doesn't necessarily have a new coach, but they're going to have a lot of new players. How about Ole Miss? So Ole
Yeah.
Miss, I mean, I thought last year that they had a pretty easy schedule. And then I started looking at this year's schedule. I'm like, man, this is really set up well for Ole Miss. I mean, the SEC are always going to have a fairly tough schedule because there's so many good teams there, but it's set up very well. Lane Kiffin always goes all in the portal. I mean, they're going to get all these new players. As far as turnover, he's always going to be right up there. I think it's set up pretty good for them, and I think there is at least somewhat of an opportunity for some of these other teams in the SEC based on Alabama taking a step back, at least on that side. Georgia is still going to be fantastic, obviously, but and when it comes to the West, there's going to be a lot of new players, some new coaches. I feel like there's opportunity there in the SEC that hasn't really been there for a few years.
Yeah, I agree. I think the ghost of Nick Saban is gone. He's had leads against Alabama, hasn't finished it off. I think he does finish it off. I think this is definitely a top 10 team. Let's move to the Big Ten. And I want to start with Indiana. And the reason I want to start with Indiana is because I'm old and I've been doing this for 40 some years. There's certain teams that I just don't understand. And for Indiana, I don't understand why they're not good at football. Why is Wisconsin good at football? Why is Minnesota good at football? And why isn't Indiana good at football? And I think with all the money that the Big Ten has right now, this is Indiana's chance to be good at football because they just hired James Madison's coach. And what he's done, not just there, but he's also been on the staff at places like Alabama, North Carolina State, Pittsburgh. This is their chance, I think, to prove to themselves that they're just not going to be complacent in the Big Ten, but they can be an 8 to 10 win team in the Big Ten, not just in a COVID year under Tom Allen, a good defensive coach, but maybe not. Maybe as it turns out, he topped out as a head coach. I like this hire a lot. I know you necessarily can't go from nothing to something in 1 year flat, but what do you think about this? And he has a transfer quarterback, Rourke from Ohio, that might get the job done quicker than people think. I really like this hire.
Ron, I think this is an A+ hire. Like, this is one of my favorite of the offseason. Cignetti is a fantastic coach. We've seen how good James Madison was at stopping the run. I mean, that defensive line was fantastic. He's bringing in several of those same guys from James Madison that were on the 2 deep there. I think Indiana's going to be significantly improved from last year. I'm going to be curious to see what kind of win total comes out on Indiana. This is a team that I will be likely betting a season win total over on. Now, I think, James Madison, what they've done well at, it's not going to be obviously as easy in the Big Ten to stuff the run as where James Madison was. But if you look at the stats for Indiana, even though Allen was a good defensive mind, a lot of the recent years, they were really not very good defensively. Remember, they had some good coordinators who left. They really kind of got stuck. Back in the COVID year, they had 2 really good coordinators who were both gone not long after that. And it seemed like they just never really replaced that. And to me, I think that this is a Indiana team that has the best opportunity they've had in a really long time. Now, can they win a ton of games right away? Probably not. Are they going to be better? Yes. And I think they'll be a good team ATS as well. So this is a team that I'll look to try to back in every way I can. This is one where, if you're asking me to grade coaching hires, this would be right at the top of my list.
Good. Yeah. Michigan. I'm going to let you start because the joys and the heartbreaks with Michigan, but I'm sure you know this team better than most. Massive changes. What do you think?
I think Michigan was in this interesting spot because Harbaugh, you remember a few years ago when Harbaugh was like, is he going to get fired? What's going to happen with Harbaugh? He wasn't doing well enough. You get to the COVID year, they were really struggling. Obviously, he turned things around. Everybody who knows me, I mean, it's obvious I'm an Ohio State fan. But I am fair-minded when it comes to handicapping college football, and he did a really good job with this team. Sharon Moore comes in, and I'm curious most, Ron, like, is he going to just keep the exact same game plan that Harbaugh's had and try to go with this exact same, like let's win the same way we did, or is he going to put his own stamp on this team in some way? I think that Michigan, um, with the pickups that Ohio State has had in the offseason, and I'll save you guys from me getting all excited about all the Ohio State pickups, but Ohio State is going to be a better team talent-wise than they were last year. There's no doubt about that. Michigan is in a little bit of a changing mode, and they're going to lose some of the talent that they did, quite a bit of the talent they had. The offensive line was so key. I think they had to hire more because so many of the players really liked him. He did a good job when Harbaugh was gone. I know I saw some of the names that were out there on, like when they said, well, these are the people who could be linked to Michigan if they don't hire from within. And I'll be honest, some of those guys, I was like, oh man, I hope Michigan doesn't get him. Like this would be really scary. Like a Chris Kleiman, somebody like that, who's been consistently an amazing coach. I don't know that we know how Sharon Moore will do as a head coach. I mean, it is kind of more guessing. He did a good job there, but that was Harbaugh's system. He was just kind of in that spot. I guess I would say that, the arrow would be pointing down for Michigan, but you have to be pointing down from where they were. So it's not me really saying I think Michigan's going to be bad. But there's just more unknowns about a team like Michigan. Like, why would you want to bet a season win total on Michigan unless they put some kind of ridiculous number out there? Because there are lots of different ways that the season could go that I don't think it would be terribly surprising, would it?
Yeah. I'm cautiously pessimistic about Michigan in the long term. In the short term, a lot of what happened, the feeling of the national championship, the animation that Moore showed while taking over, was really strong. And I think that enthusiasm is going to stick around perhaps for 2024. And maybe it's not a bad year at all this year. Talent level, they're not going to be like Ohio State. You referenced that briefly, and Ohio State picked up a lot of talent. But I think beginning in 2025, you have one of those things where you had to hire the interim, and down the road you say, no, we've got to go outside the box. I look for this as being kind of a 3-year move, and maybe I'll be proven wrong because Michigan has money. They can recruit. They can do a lot of things. They can get a lot of people in the program. I'm just worried about this coaching staff taking the next step or being on the same level as Harbaugh's coaching staff. They promoted a lot of people from within, but it's their first jobs in a lot of cases where they were offensive analysts or something like that. Some of the better coaches have left. And then they bring in Wink Martindale as defensive coordinator. And that's boom or bust, in my opinion. I am not a huge Wink Martindale fan as far as NFL is concerned. And some of these guys that go college to NFL or NFL to college, they bring something that the college game hasn't seen, but they also sometimes do not adapt to the college game. I'll be looking not necessarily to fade Michigan right away, but if I see something at the crossover I don't like, and if I see something that I want to jump on early in the future, I'm going to be kind of bearish on Michigan, to be honest.
Yeah, I would say I'm slightly cautiously pessimistic as well, but I want to be careful on that take based on, I'm a Buckeyes fan and I've seen them prove many people wrong the last few years.
Yeah.
So they're probably still going to be pretty good in the trenches, even with losing a lot of people. And I think you're right. We might, if we see a dip, it might not be as soon as some people think. And then let's wait and see 2 or 3 years from now how they're looking compared to where they were, because they lost a lot of coaches. And I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong necessarily, but I think Harbaugh took more coaches with him than I would have expected. I mean, like he really took a lot of people away from Michigan. I know some Michigan fans are like, my goodness, is he going to leave anybody? Like this is like the entire staff is gone. He's going all in there to try to win it in the NFL. And, who can blame him necessarily? But Michigan, like you said, has some new guys who are kind of unproven. So we'll see how that goes. Ron, you have to start on this next one. And it's another rival of Michigan. So Michigan State, I know this one's a little painful for you, but what do you think?
So we just got through Michigan and all the coaches, that left for Harbaugh. This is the part of the program where if you want to go out, get a drink, and you don't want to hear Ron's rant, go right ahead. Jonathan Smith is a good coach. There's no question about that. Born and bred in terms of leading the Oregon State program, quarterback of the Fiesta Bowl, which I was one of those drunken people that was at the game. Actually, I lost my voice before I could really drink. I drank hot tea after the Notre Dame 41-9 game that they had. He brings a lot of coaches, including one of the best offensive line coaches in the nation, with him in this one. Joe Moore, award finalist, Oregon State's team as far as the running game. The last 2 years, Michigan, I think, was the top team this past year, but Oregon State was right there. He brings the offensive coordinator with him. He brings the prize recruit with him, Aiden Childs at quarterback. So the rosters this is not one of those cases like some of the teams we've discussed where there's a net loss in the portal. There's a net gain for Michigan State in the portal. Now, there was a lot of damage done with the coaching and with all the off the field drama with Michigan State and their last couple of coaches. They probably got this one right from an X's and O's standpoint. I think there's going to be a winning culture here. I don't think it's going to be automatically done early. It wasn't done early at Oregon State. Michigan State has a lot of ground to catch up on. They're still going to have to face Oregon and Washington. I don't know exactly what the schedule is, but over time, they're going to face some challenging teams. USC is certainly going to be challenging. Ohio State's not going away. Penn State's always tough. So they may struggle to get to 6 or 7 wins this year, but you're going to see step building as we go through to the point where Michigan State is going to probably compete at the highest level. But the last thought I'll make on this, I'll probably, I'm not a big stock market guy, but I think I'll probably have some stock in Goodwill as we move forward, because that's where all the Oregon State gear magically appeared after he left town from Oregon State. And it's not going to be fun talking about Michigan State during the year. But if you put it just on an X's and O's standpoint, Michigan State massively improved.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of saying it. Smith is clearly a good developer of talent. Like even if they aren't the highest level talent, he's going to make them the best they can possibly be. I think Lindgren's underrated. I think he's done a really good job as an offensive coordinator. Michigan State, like you said, they've had some poor hires before this. So I'm confident that this is an upgrade. That I'm very confident of. What is it going to mean immediately? I'm not really confident what's going to happen next year. I am confident that this program's at least on the right path going forward. Like you said, I mean, it's going to be tough. And recruiting wise, how are they going to do? Is he going to be able to recruit enough to be competitive with some of the better teams there? I mean, it's going to be a tough competition in the recruiting market there. So I don't think that they'll have very top recruiting classes, but I think they'll be one of those teams that could be pretty good ATS. I mean, Oregon State was great against the spread for many years. You know this. I think they'll probably be good against the spread going forward as well. So overall, a good hire there for Michigan State. Okay, UCLA. So this, even when I look in the notes now, it doesn't make any sense to me that UCLA is in the same conversation with Michigan and Michigan State. Like, this realignment is wacky, but it's here. We got to deal with it. I don't know what to think of UCLA, Ron. This is one where I'm like, I hope you have something to give me where, you think strongly one way or another on UCLA. Now, Bieniemy is a fun hire. I think that's going to be interesting based on his past. We know he is a good offensive mind, but UCLA, Chip Kelly leaves. I think Chip Kelly's a good coach, good offensive mind. Foster, an unknown. I mean, I don't know what to expect here. So, instead of me keep rambling, I mean, do you have any thoughts here on UCLA, Ron?
This could go. This is not one of those where, okay, they're middle of the road, they're going to stay to one side or the other. But I mean, they're either going to cross the road and crash and burn on the freeway and tip over 6 times, or they're going to win the Grand Prix, because there's a tremendous number of outcomes that can happen with UCLA. Let's start with the positive. Recruiting is going to spike up, I believe, even though they're down in the transfer portal right now with people leaving and not getting a lot of people. I just think Chip Kelly didn't care about recruiting, and his offensive scheme was unbelievable. He can get any team to run above its norm, but he just didn't care about recruiting. Deshaun Foster is a guy that the UCLA alumni like, that he's going to bring enthusiasm to the program. On the plus side, Eric Bieniemy is an in-your-face coach. He challenges you, but he also, with his years coaching with Andy Reid, is going to bring some wrinkles to the system that will be different than Chip Kelly, but maybe just as effective. But there's a lot of downside here too. Moving to the Big Ten right now, I think is good for other sports for UCLA, because they're going to have an easier time than against their Pac-12 opponents in sports like baseball and other sports. But in football, in the trenches, I don't think this is going to work as well. They had a 1-year spike defensively, and they lost their defensive coordinator to USC, so they couldn't even keep him. They're going into uncharted territory defensively. They're going in with, I think, a slightly incomplete roster. I think they're going to be out physicaled in a number of different areas. I think this is a potentially 6-win team. I don't know the schedule, out of conference schedule off the top of my head. Potentially 6-win team that, if all goes right recruiting wise, maybe Deshaun Foster is the answer and they get to 8 or 9 wins. I don't think you're going to see this team as a double-digit team unless something really changes. And I can see a scenario where you're looking at a 4-8 record.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like there's more downside potential than upside potential here. So unknown, but downside potential that is concerning. Washington. So obviously DeBoer, who we talked about a little bit ago, leaves Washington. He left them in a great spot, obviously. Now, again, when a coach leaves, you got that window, and quite a few people left from Washington. Fish did a great job. I don't know that too many coaches did a better job with what they had than Fish did. I mean, I have to think this is at least a pretty good hire. But again, Washington, I mean, we could say some of the same things that we talked about with UCLA about Washington. That, I mean, it's definitely going to be difficult for Washington in the trenches to hold their own. Is that a 1-year thing where they kind of, take the next step? It's going to be really hard to get back to where they were immediately or very soon. Does that mean that Fish is a bad hire? It doesn't. He's up against it if those are the expectations. I think he's a good hire. What do you think of Fish as the hire here, and then also kind of the new system of offense that they'll have and coordinators here?
Yeah, my first reaction was, wow, Washington's losing a lot of talent. They're using a creative coach. Whoever goes in here, I'm looking to fade. But having thought about it a little more, watching, a little bit more, studying a little bit more about Fish, maybe some of the talent isn't leaving as much. Will Rogers comes over as the quarterback. He has tons of experience. What Fish did, like you referenced, just from 1 year to the next, was a really nice climb. And Fish is not one of your guys, oh, he's been around 2 or 3 years. He's been around for a while, and he's been with some big name and an extremely varied coaching career. So I'm not as down on him. I don't understand the Steve Belichick hire as defensive coordinator, because he's pretty much been only at New England. So, that's a ton of unknown for defensively. I don't know. I think a lot of people, what I like in the transfer portal is a lot of people followed him from Arizona to Washington. Maybe not the biggest names, but a lot of the names did come there. I'm cautiously optimistic for Washington, but like you, probably it's going to be flat or down for a variety of reasons in 2024. But I think if people give him space and time, I think Washington will be fine.
I think that's fair. So I guess that kind of wraps up the Big Ten, where there's a lot of changes, especially with conference realignment, some of these road games. Ron, I don't think I've told you this before, but like my bucket list thing was to go to every Big Ten stadium and watch Ohio State play. Yeah. That list is getting a lot bigger. So I was telling my wife, I'm like, I don't know, are we going to be able to go to every single stadium? Hopefully, but be nice. I look forward to going to the Rose Bowl someday, and places like that.
Well, we'll have to hook up if you get to the Rose Bowl, because
for sure,
even though I've moved, I'm still not that far from LA. So absolutely.
We will, but yeah, that's going to be a lot of changes in the Big Ten. It's going to look a lot different.
Well, Power 2 conferences are done. The next Power 2 conferences are up and we have a few changes, and they're interesting. Why don't you start with Boston College, with Bill O'Brien coming in there? We see a little bit of a trend where some of these coaches, these college head coaches from the non-Power 5 and even Boston College, are leaving for different types of jobs now because of what we talked about at the beginning of the year, the challenge of nil and the transfers. Can you win at Boston College? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I don't know that Boston College is a spot that I'd be excited to go try to win at, based on the competition. Now, I don't really want to get too in depth with it, but I know some people think that the ACC is going to look quite a bit different here in a couple of years as far as who's going to be there. I'm not great at speculating on who's going to go where and places like that. That's not something I really handicap. But the current state of the ACC, Boston College is up against teams that I don't know. I mean, I don't know why you'd be excited to say, how can I go to Boston College and win this conference? It's going to be really difficult. Now, one plus is, it's kind of far away from a lot of the other teams there. And I feel like they have a decent home field advantage compared to some of the teams there in that conference. But, how do you feel about playing against teams like, Florida State, North Carolina, Louisville? I mean, plenty of these teams. Obviously, I'm looking at their schedule here for next year. They do play Michigan State at home this next year. They play at Virginia Tech, at Virginia. I don't know. I don't know that I feel strongly one way or the other about O'Brien as a head coach in this spot. But I think that, this is not one of those jobs that everybody would have jumped at. This feels like a spot where the top coaches would not consider this. So, is that an indictment of O'Brien? I don't know. I mean, for me personally, I was kind of happy that O'Brien went there, and then they ended up with Chip Kelly did Ohio State instead of O'Brien, but we'll see how that works out. I just think that Boston College is, they had a previous coach who we should probably say this, the previous coach who left in a way that was kind of surprising. We don't see coaches leave. He wasn't fired. I don't know that he was going to get fired anytime really soon, but he leaves to go. It was the Packers, right? I think it was it Green Bay?
I believe Packers defense coordinator replacing Joe Barry. Maybe a slightly low bar there, but I'm not sure Boston College's defense was great.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's interesting because we haven't seen too many college head coaches at a pretty big conference just up and leave to be a coordinator somewhere else. Now, obviously, this is the NFL, but I think that was somewhat him saying, I don't know if I can win that much here. So that's kind of my take here. I don't know that I'm necessarily high or low on O'Brien, but I don't think the upside there is tremendous.
Yeah, I think we're on the same wavelength here. Boston College, they give you maybe a longer leash because they're not all in. It's at least from my standpoint on their football program. They're okay if they go to bowl games and finish 7-5, 8-5 would be great and stuff like that. Maybe this is their attempt to hire a name coach who's had some highs resurrecting or keeping that Penn State program afloat under all those sanctions after Paterno's exit. And then some lows where he didn't exactly fix New England. He was supposed to be a massive step upgrade as coordinator in New England, and it didn't happen. So it's a chance for O'Brien to resurrect his career. It's a chance for Boston College to say we're a little bit more serious about college football. I just think 6-6 in the ACC isn't all that great an accomplishment anyway. And I think we're treading water here. And I'm going to come into this, Kyle, with I think I'm going to be very open-minded with how it goes. And I'm not going to form an opinion highly positive or highly negative, and see if I can catch on to some situations where I say, hey, that's better than what I thought or worse than what I thought. I'm just going to go in with a blank slate because it looks to me like middle of the road right now.
Yep, I think we're thinking alike on this one. So Duke, we already talked about Duke losing a really good coach. That's for sure. What about the new coach they have in Manny Diaz? To me, he has plenty to prove. This is a guy who has not been great as a head coach. We know he's a good defensive mind. It's also harder to recruit at Duke. You can't recruit the same way that some other schools would. I don't really trust Diaz to have the high upside that they had with Elko. So I have to consider this a downgrade. I mean, there's no way it's not anything but a downgrade for me. It's just a question is how much. Obviously, Diaz is at least capable to where there's some upside potential. But to me, the downside potential is larger than is the upside potential here.
Yeah, I think recruiting will spike. Manny Diaz did a lot in recruiting. The problem was he didn't develop the players like I would have expected. Miami was a football hotbed for a long time, back in the 80s, 90s, and so on. They had Howard Schnellenberger. They had Jimmy Johnson. I mean, they've had some good coaches. They even had Dennis Erickson there. So they've had some really good coaches. And Manny Diaz had the talent to be considered as a double-digit. And they should have won double digits, and somehow they went to a low. And once they lost, they tended to lose 2 or 3 games in a row. So he's on the line right here. He's in a program, Duke. He's in a conference, the ACC, which you can string together a bunch of wins. And he's going to have some good recruiting there. They lost a quarterback, Leonard, who unfortunately didn't stay healthy enough at Duke, but certainly was a good quarterback. I think they're going to rely on a highly touted transfer from Texas, Murphy. So it'd be interesting to see how he develops. Lukewarm on the coaching staff. Their first-time special team coordinator. Again, I have to mention this because Duke has lived in the top 30 in special team ratings. All we need to see is a little bit of downgrade in special teams, and maybe some close wins become close losses, which has maybe been something that Manny Diaz has lived with already. So I think they're going to bring in more talent overall than they had at Duke. And yet I think they're going to have an equal or maybe slightly lower record because, like you, I think Manny Diaz has to prove something to me.
Yeah, I agree. And it's going to be hard to live up to the way Leonard was playing at quarterback. I know they bring in a guy who's pretty highly touted, but Leonard was really good when he was healthy. So, I think a little bit of a downgrade in general. Syracuse with Fran Brown. I mean, I know Syracuse fans are super excited based on the recruiting they've had early on. They're going to be better talent-wise. I don't know how you felt about Dino Babers. I guess that's something we could discuss here briefly. But Syracuse always started well and then kind of fell apart. So I don't know, what that means for what they'll be here, but hopefully they could play better football at the end of the season.
Yeah, Dino Babers was way too streaky for my like. String together a bunch of wins once they lost and whatever. I saw no program continuity. You're more of into the schemes, the college schemes, the pace of play, and so on. I didn't see a lot of adjustments. I mean, the best thing he did was bring in Rocky Long as defensive coordinator. So they changed a few things that way. So he was trying with the coaching tree to get things right. But from a X's and O's head coach standpoint, I think it's fine to move on from him. But I had to do some research on Fran Brown because he had, to me, a small resume. This is a big leap from Temple and Rutgers and from his experience there. All I've seen and all I've read from him is that he's assembled a staff that might be the greatest recruiting staff in the history of college football. I don't know. I mean, obviously there's a different kind of recruiting if you're at an Alabama or if you're a North Carolina basketball program and you mention the name Dean Smith or something like that. You can recruit without recruiting. But from what I've heard, Syracuse football has the best recruiters in the nation now. Now, how that transfers to on-field coaching, I have no idea. For me, Kyle, I have no idea what the coaching staff is going to do, what their scheme's going to be. I don't know what to look for, so I'm going to be in learning mode. I don't know if you can add anything else to that.
No, I really can't. I mean, and McCord, I mean, I don't want to get too in depth with this, but McCord was only okay at Ohio State. Probably not as bad as some Ohio State fans thought, but not as good as some people would think if you say, well, the Ohio State quarterback's coming over to Syracuse is going to be amazing. I don't know. Syracuse, there's plenty of question marks. We don't know anything about Fran Brown as an in-game coach, really. I mean, is he going to do a good job? There are some pretty good coaches in the ACC, I feel like. So, I think Syracuse fans have reason to be upbeat, but, I don't want to go out on a limb and say they're going to be amazing or have this huge jump. So, plenty to wait and see there. Okay, so let's jump into the Big 12, right? We're going to talk about
Yeah,
the Big
Joe, we
12.
just have two more to go. And the Big 12, I got to tell you, how many teams are in the Big 12 now? 40? I don't know. 16 or something like that. It seems like in every year there's going to be new teams at the top and the bottom. It's going to be like the NFC South with the Tampa, Atlanta, Carolina, whatever. To me, it's going to be a revolving door at the top. So coaching matters. So start with Arizona. This was part of the trickle-down effect with Nick Saban. And now we've got Brian Brennan there. What are your thoughts on Brian Brennan at Arizona?
Yeah, I mean, I think Brennan did a good job at San Jose State, and I'll try to be a little bit brief because I got to go get the kids here before too long. So we could talk for forever, Ron. You know that.
I know.
But, the Brent Brennan at San Jose State did a good job, but the great job that he did was in the COVID year. So we know weird things happened in that COVID year, and they kind of took a step back a decent amount after that. I don't know that I think that this is a home run hire or anything like some people might have if it were a couple of years ago, but Arizona was not in a great spot. So they wouldn't have gotten, their pick of the very top candidates in all the coaching cycle. So to me, this is one of those like C plus or B minus hires where it's not a bad hire, but I'm not excited either. I don't know. Do you feel similarly or what do you think here?
Yeah, I like Brian Brennan, who resurrected the San Jose State program. He had his heart set on being the Oregon State next coach. That didn't work out. So here he is in Arizona, who doesn't have a lot of money to pay. That's why they lose these guys. They're financially in debt. I like what he did in 2023, resurrecting the run game. I think they have some good coaches, and I know they have Daniel Babers as offensive coordinator. That'll be interesting. They have a 45-year experienced defensive coordinator, although his tenure wasn't great, so I don't know how that'll go. I love Danny Gonzalez as a linebacker coach and special team coordinator there. He's not a quick fix guy, Brennan, so I think they're going to take some baby steps. They're going to be possibly going through growing pains at quarterback right now, maybe growing pains in the portal as well. Some of the guys is stuck. I think for the long term, if Arizona is patient, I think you're going to see progress with this hire, but C plus sounds about right.
Okay, and I will say maybe as a tease, and I don't know exactly when we'll be able to do this, Ron, but I think we'll try to talk about a group of five here at some point. It may have to be a little bit out in the future based on schedules and stuff with college basketball. But uh, I want to tease the fact that San Jose State, I mean, what a hire that they made there that's going to be like this big unknown in Niumatalolo. This is a spot where I'm going to look forward to talking to you about that one. Like, is he going to run
Okay.
the triple option? What's he going to do? So that's my quick tease of that. Let's talk about Houston. Let's talk about Houston. Fritz is an amazing coach. I mean, I don't know how anybody could disagree with anything. Fritz has been great against the spread. He's been fantastic as an underdog. He has gone places that have far less money or in a much tougher situation and had success. So to me, this is at least an A hire in Willie Fritz. Uh, I mean, do you feel the same way? Do you think this is a really good hire? And I
Yeah.
mean, there's obviously money around there as well. So
Yeah, it's one of my favorite hires. Again, we're on the same wavelength. And it's interesting. Maybe we'll be on a different wavelength when we talk group of five. And I agree, maybe down the road, once college basketball is more tame, I think it's a worthy discussion if people are interested. Hopefully they are, because group of five coaches can make a big difference as well. Fritz has been a winner everywhere he's gone. And to fix a program from one style, Dana Holgerson's style is completely different, to another style is now easier because of the portal and nil and whatever. 3 years ago, this would have been a terrible first year for Fritz. Now I'm not so sure. I like his defensive coordinator hire better than the offensive coordinator hire. Troy experience, Tulane experience, replacing a lot of talent. I think it's going to be really good. I've heard that they're retaining Donovan Smith at quarterback. Their goal should be to get to a bowl game. I mean, Houston was so unpredictable. Dana Holgerson was one of the strangest coaches that I've ever been associated with in all the years that I've dealt with college football programs. There's a bit of continuity and steadiness that Willie Fritz brings to the program. It may not be a home run right away, but just to get on the same page week after week instead of all these highs and lows, get to a bowl game, get those extra practices, and make 2025 really big. I think that's the goal for Houston this coming year. Every game is going to be a challenge. Every game is going to be a pick-em type affair in that conference. Willie Fitz is a really good hire.
fantastic hire, one of the best that we've talked about here.
Yeah.
And even if he doesn't make them amazing in year one, I'm really confident that they'll get better before long. So I like this one. Just kind of closing thoughts here, Ron. I guess I would say both of us clearly like the Fritz hire. I like Signetti a lot at Indiana. I think you like that one a lot as well. Those are two that you won't hear as much necessarily from the mainstream media. That's not going to be the first ones they'll talk about, especially Signetti. But I think under the radar, those are really good hires. And, just kind of to sum this up, I guess, change can be frustrating, but I think change can also give us opportunities. So this is why we try to talk about things like this and see if we can kind of get ahead of the market.
Nowadays, the best coaches are not just X's and O's. It's roster chemistry. You're going to be dealing with entirely new rosters. You can't study what you did last year to this year. You're bringing in new coordinators. You're bringing in all new quarterbacks and everything. And some of the people we've mentioned that we're higher on are people that we think can do that chemistry part as well as the head coaching part. They're proven in a lot of different areas, and they've made teams that are under the radar better than what people think. And I think that's what makes them really good hires. It's been a pleasure really covering this with you in terms of the Power 4-5 conferences. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do this down the road for the others. It's really a brainstorming session. I really appreciated the fact that we got a chance to do this.
Yeah, Ron, it's always great to chat with you. Ron knows a lot about handicapping college football and the NFL. Usually we talk about college football. I know Las Vegas Chris and you do a great job breaking down the NFL together. I've been able to catch some of your shows. So I recommend people check those out as well. But yeah, we'll try to do a group of 5. I think it probably might have to be like, later in March or early April or something like that after things slow back down for college basketball. But we will do that. And then we'll still have plenty of time to be kind of ahead of the market at that point. Steve said never too early to touch on college football. That's true. That's why we're here. So both of us love talking college football. Ron, we were able to chat about college football for an hour and 15 minutes, even though it's 6 months away. So that's definitely a good thing. And Ron, so we will try to do the group of 5 here coming up. We'll let people know on Twitter or X when that will be. And why don't you let people know where they can find your information in general?
Okay. Yeah, Kyle, again, thanks. And definitely follow Kyle for college basketball. The tournament is coming, and that's one of the most exciting things in sports. So Kyle will be on it. I'll dabble in the tournament, but football's my thing. I have an article that's out today on Wager Talk talking about the NFL Combine and my thoughts of how to approach the Combine and how I've approached the Combine and combine it with tape work and so on. I think the Combine actually helped shape my feelings about the draft, about wagering, about a lot of different things. So I encourage you to look at that. I agree. I wish Las Vegas Chris, my partner in crime and my friend for the last 12, 15 years, an absolute speedy recovery. And I hope we can get back to talking about NFL on our podcast because the brainstorming we do, similar to this with you, Kyle, is so invaluable, not just for others, but for me, for us to learn about like-minded people and bounce ideas off each other. And every once in a while, maybe I'll do a podcast or two, NFL draft coming up and so on. Otherwise, it's the off season.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to the NFL draft as well. And I want to wish my best to Las Vegas Chris as well. I was able to meet up with him in Vegas there briefly last year. I don't know him near as well as you do, but I can tell he's a great person and he likes to help out other people. So wishing him the best. I know he has a great attitude about everything, which is fantastic. So best to Chris. Hope you guys can get back to doing the NFL stuff and appreciate your time here today, Ron, as well. And guys, follow what Ron's doing. You can follow him there on Twitter as well at Ron A Sports. You can follow me at Kyle Hunter Picks. HunterSportsPicks.com is the site. You can check out my work there. Sign up for the free picks newsletter as well. And we'll be back for a group of 5 one here coming up, and we'll let you know when that'll be. Hopefully this information was helpful, and take care, everybody. Enjoy the off season. We'll talk to you again soon.